welcome to the Imposter Syndrome workshop today. I'm Atika and this is Bella. And we're here in Google Singapore. Very excited to have you join us. Welcome. Just a quick introduction of ourselves for the Imposter Syndrome workshop. I am Atika. I'm based here in Google Singapore, and I've been in Google for the past 6 months. And I lead the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs here in Google APAC.
Great. Hey everyone, my name is Bella. I'm a software engineer here at Google on the Pay team. I work on the Android phone app. And I've been at Google for 11 years.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
On different products.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today for the Imposter Syndrome workshop. A huge shout out as well. We do have chat moderators waiting to interact with you. Do say hi to them. We have Jane as well as Jamie. They're there to answer any questions that you have, and then we will have a question component at the end as well, where we'll go through live questions. So do stay with us till the end, where we'll be answering the questions live. So say hi to the moderators, and then we'll be very excited to have you have the questions answered at the end as well. So why are we here today, Bella?
So we're going to talk about what is imposter syndrome, why is it important, and how you can beat it.
Yeah, it's really important. You know, we're all here. It's a very important thing in Google as well. You know, so if you're here, if you just joined us, welcome to the Imposter Syndrome workshop. We're really excited to go through this. So just a quick. What is imposter syndrome, right? And imposter syndrome really is the feeling that you are not actually qualified for the success that you have or the work that you do, and the fear that you will be discovered as a fraud. So it is a psychological phenomenon where people cannot internalize their successes. And a lot of the times they ask themselves like, oh my God, I just got lucky, or like
I did something amazing, but I don't feel like I did it.
Yeah.
Like I just got lucky.
Yeah, like anybody could do it. And also a big part of this imposter syndrome, right? Just the fact from the word imposter is the feeling that you're an imposter and you're faking it. And like someday someone is going to figure you out as a fraud. So you're constantly living under this stress of like, oh, I'm not good enough. People are just going to, figure out that I'm faking it and things like that. So any visible proof of success is dismissed as luck, timing, or a result of deceiving people. And this really is an actual phenomenon, right? And like, let's ask ourselves like whether or not we struggle with imposter syndrome.
So how do you tell if you have it, right? So you can ask yourself these questions. Do you think that all your achievements were because of luck or of timing, and like you didn't actually work for it, you just got lucky?
Yeah.
Or the things you did, everyone else can do anyway, so it's not that big of an achievement. Or you did something but it wasn't good enough, like you could have done it a lot better, kind of thing.
So and like, do you know, like if someone gives you constructive criticism, like do you feel as if it's an evidence of ineptness, right?
So like you take it the wrong way, like, oh, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, and it's like it's an evidence of like, oh, like yes, I am a fraud, I don't deserve any of this success, right?
Yeah.
And like, do you feel as if it's a matter of time before you got found out? And like I know I definitely struggle with imposter syndrome a lot, like throughout the years, and very recently it's like when I first joined Google, and I still struggle with this. It's like sometimes I look around me and I'm like, I shouldn't be here, I don't deserve to be here, I'm just lucky. It got to a point where I truly did not believe that I deserved this, that I had to sit down with my manager and ask her, like, why did you hire me? And it got to a point like I really didn't believe it,
Yeah.
like, and that's a total imposter syndrome, right?
But what did she say?
And she was like, of course you deserve to be here. You're hired because you're the best person for the job. You have all of the skills that we need and all this experience. And, you're not a fake. Like essentially she was able to say, you're facing imposter syndrome. Let's talk about this, right? What about you? Have you faced it before?
I actually face it all the time since I graduated, and I've been here for 11 years.
Wow.
But most concretely, this happened just today, as an example. So a bit of background, I've been on the current team for about a year, and during that time, I've launched a bunch of features, and at the time, I feel like I kind of scraped by, like almost didn't launch them, or like could have been done better, but and also with a lot of other people's help.
Yeah.
So I felt like, oh, it could have been better.
You were so hard on yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize is that having done all that built a lot of credibility for me in other people's eyes, my teammates, my manager. And so I was just talking to my junior colleague today, and then he was telling me that when he talks to our manager about issues that he's having, and other teammates on our team also, when they have issues and they tell our manager why this feature isn't on time or whatever, our manager doesn't really believe them or doesn't think it's like a legitimate issue of why it's slowing them down. But they say that when I'm also in the conversation with them and I know their work, because I'm closer more to their work and I can vouch for why this is a legitimate issue, and I can explain to our manager why it's legitimate, the manager believes them more. And so I was really taken aback by this revelation because, first of all, it's two things. I realized that our manager really trusts me. And then another thing is that I feel like really good that I'm able to lead and be a mentor and a guide for my junior colleagues. And one of the hallmarks of being a senior engineer isn't just that you can tackle really complicated problems. It's also being able to lead more junior people and help them grow, and letting them be comfortable with themselves as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's being a leader, and I didn't really realize that I was able to do this.
And and the fact that you've been here 11 years and you still struggle with being an imposter, that's mind-blowing, because you think about like, hey, like, you've been here for so long, and I guess the thing about Google is you're surrounded with so many capable people and so many highly intelligent people, and even outside of Google, right, there's always so many times where we think, oh, we're not good enough. And if you just joined us, this is the Imposter Syndrome Workshop. So a really cool example that I read recently about someone who faces imposter syndrome, is Neil Armstrong, literally the first man who walked on the moon, like went to an event with a lot of other scientists, a lot of notable people, and he was just at the corner of the room thinking to himself, like, oh my god, like, these people are going to find out that I'm a fraud and I'm a fake. And I remember reading it, I was like, if Neil Armstrong thinks that he's going to be taken as a fake and he struggles with imposter syndrome, like,
everyone is prone to this.
Yes, it totally is. And if you do relate, it really means that imposter syndrome is really the domain of the high achiever. It's not always people who want to push themselves to be better, who wants to aspire to be better. And when you kind of get into that space, you don't want to settle for mediocrity. You always kind of think that you're never good enough, right? And
so you're setting a really high bar for yourself, and so it's good to differentiate that positive aspect of it, to have it be a driving force to push you forward, but also recognize that there's a negative aspect, and recognize it and don't let it bring you down.
Yeah, and like, you're not a fake. Like, if you're successful and you have all these achievements, then own it, right? And this is really so important, because if you are always putting yourself down, it's gonna have an impact on some of the many other things that you do, right? And who experiences it? Like, these are, like we said,
like we just said,
everyone does. We struggle with imposter syndrome. Even like when we were approached to do this workshop, we're like, should we be the ones running it? But it really, we totally know what this means. Like, 70 to 80% of people who have been studied have reported feeling this way at some point. And very interestingly, these are all highly successful people. It's more common in women than men. It's more often minorities, young professional, college students. People are still trying to find their way within the wall, right? And you kind of always...
They don't have, like, traditionally, they didn't have the feedback that everyone telling them, you can do it, you can do it. So you need to give yourself that boost.
Yeah. And we're here to also share with you our experiences, share with you that it really is normal, but also share some of the ways to address it and beat it, right?
And it's really important that you do feel empowered, because we value at Google everyone's opinion. we want there to be a diverse workforce, and so everyone's contributions matter.
Yeah, and just so she mentioned, right? Flobella mentioned, imposter syndrome is something so prevalent in Google that we actually studied it, right? It got to a point where we realized that it was an issue and that we needed to find ways to talk about it. And what happens is that people who struggle with imposter syndrome often don't like to take high risk, right? They don't like to innovate. They don't like to put themselves in difficult situations because they don't feel capable, right?
They don't feel capable, and they don't want to risk failing.
Yeah, they don't want to risk people finding out that they're a fake or a fraud. And
Yeah.
so you kind of always like shy away. And that's really an issue because in Google and in many other places outside, we really value innovation. We value
And we
people-
want you to take risks,
Yeah.
so that we can have new products.
Yeah, new products. And it's really important because all of us bring so many value and so much perspective. And so when we tell ourselves that we are not good enough or we're just a fake, that we're kind of putting a barrier from growth, like barrier between ourselves and all these other opportunities, which is why it's really important that we are having this workshop. A lot of you are students, you're going to be preparing for interviews and things like that, and to be able to recognize that imposter syndrome is something that you may be facing is important, so then we can address it, right?
And you're gonna be, and the reason why it's so prevalent at Google is because at Google there's a lot of smart people. So
Yeah.
when you're surrounded by a lot of smart people, you feel like you're not smart enough.
Like
but,
you're not good enough. So.
But what we want to drive home is that you are.
Like you
Right.
are, you know, because there are very detrimental effects on you for imposter syndrome, right? What are some of the effects?
So you can read on the slide, but these are things that I personally feel all the time, so I can attest to them. So I when I get hit by this syndrome, I'm super stressed. I'm very hard on myself. I'm not as confident in telling people what I've done, and then that's also negative feedback from like other people.
Yeah, because people also don't feel it, right? They feel that you're stressed.
You're stressed and like
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember like when I first joined Google and I was really struggling with imposter syndrome, I was very closed off. I was very stressed. Like it was very obvious. I didn't feel as if I belong. And when you don't feel like you belong, you're not willing to like go the extra mile or like trust people or do that. And you know, it really, and a really core part of it is like it really makes it difficult for you to enjoy your own success, you know? Because you like,
yeah, and then also when you feel uncomfortable with it, it also makes other people feel uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
like the more comfortable you are feeling with yourself, the more people are more at ease with you too.
Definitely. And like you will have to celebrate your success. You deserve it. Like you've gotten the achievement and things like that. You are where you are because you've succeeded in many areas of your life, and you're definitely not an imposter. And so these are really important ways to address it. And there are several ways that we can address it. But before we go into the ways that we are addressing it, do say hi to our chat moderators, Jane and Jamie. They're really on hand to answer your questions. So they are really there to support you as well. And they're
So
gonna
if
be
you
here.
have any questions, type them in and we can answer them at the end.
Yeah, so we will be answering live questions at the end as well. So back to how can we address it? Fabella, do you want to go through with us the first one?
Yeah, so there's a physical way you can address it, and then also a mental way. We'll talk about the physical thing first. So we can prepare ourselves to do this physical activity.
Shall I join you?
Sure. So basically, let's go through it first. So you count 1, 2, 3, and then you clap 2, 3, clap 2, stomp, and then clap, snap, stomp. Okay, so let's go through that together.
Let's do this, okay.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Clap 2, 3.
Clap to stomp.
Clap, snap, stomp. Right?
Let's do that again.
Okay. So I guess we can sit down now.
So wait, let's get them to also do it. Let's give them
Okay.
space to kind of do it.
Yeah, okay, so let's
wherever
do it
you are,
again.
like just stand up and
Yeah.
kind of do this with us, okay?
Okay, let's
and
do
see
it.
how you feel about it.
1, 2,
Okay,
3.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Clap 2, 3. Clap 2, stomp.
Clap,
snap, stomp.
And like, how do you feel?
Yeah, I feel great.
Yeah, I feel like I like being silly, and then it's kind of like, but you're also moving your body, right? And you kind of getting yourself to a state where
energizes you and prepares you to be more positive.
yeah, because I mean, when you realize, like, when you're in a very high stress level or things like that, like what we do know, and this is from studies and stuff like that, is that your brain gets activated into this fight or flight kind of mode, and like you're stressed out, your heart is constantly beating, you're kind of like hunched over, and you can feel it in your body, right? And what we just did is really to kind of like trace a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and release the nervous energy, trick the brain to be like, laugh a bit, make sure that you're not in any threat or any situation, and really kind of just push yourself away from this whole like, I mean,
negative, yeah.
Yeah. So that's one very nice, silly way to do this. Another thing, and this is really powerful and really important, is the power poses, right? You know, when you realize that when you're feeling not confident, there are certain ways that your body kind of moves or like position yourself to kind of protect itself, right? You're usually either hunched over, or you're like crossing your arms and kind of protecting yourself, or you're kind of like uncomfortable.
And you're hunched, yeah. I
Yeah.
think you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's hunched, and you know, you kind of, it's sending a signal to your brain that, oh, I'm not very confident, I like don't really know what I'm doing, and things like that. And sometimes, a lot of the times, we do this like even before an interview, right? Because we're so like nervous, and you're gonna do that. And it really doesn't help you, in a sense that it really doesn't help your self-confidence, and just kind of constantly puts you into a stressful...
It's a feedback loop, like you don't feel confident, so you don't look confident, which makes you not
It's
confident.
kind of like a cycle.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a study that's been done on power poses, and how it really impacts the way we show up with confidence and how people perceive us as well. And there's a whole TED talk about it, so go and like search it if you kind of want to look at it. And if you kind of look at the power poses on the screen right now, it's very powerful, like CEO, kind of like boss kind of poses, where you're either leaning across the table, or like you're opening yourself up and you're leaning back, you know, like, hey, like I've got this and stuff like that. But I have a really cool trick that I like to kind of do whenever I'm like before an interview, or before a meeting, or before a presentation, before this, it's called the Superwoman pose. People like to call it Superman, but I like to say Superwoman. So it's like you standing up, so it's you like having both your feet firmly on the ground, it's spread apart, it's very comfortable posture, and you do this, and you know, Superwoman. And so it's kind of like to tell your body like, hey, like, I am confident, I am strong, I am powerful, and like try and do this, and you really see like how there's a difference between like being like that and being like that, because you're kind of like not confident. So this is a powerful pose to have, to kind of like trick your brain to being like, I'm the best, or I'm powerful.
Yeah,
right?
So you may not be accustomed to that pose, or that's not how you usually stand. But if you do it more, it actually does trick your brain into thinking more strongly.
Yeah.
So yeah, try that.
Yeah, especially when you're in a state where like you're like questioning yourself, like trick your brain, like, you know, trick your physical body and use your physical body to your advantage. Because a lot of the times, why we struggle with imposter syndrome is this whole perception and the feeling that we get behind it, right? It's like we have this perception that what we know, like if you look at the screen right now, it's like, is this like little green circle and this like circle of blue, like, oh, you only know like really like just a small amount of things.
Everyone else knows what you know, and everyone else knows a lot more than what you know.
Yeah, it's like, I'm nothing, you know, like it's kind of not like special or not valuable in a certain things. But like the reality is, like, all of us know a lot of many different things, you know, and we're all valuable, and it's all perspective, and that there's certain overlap that happens, but both, or like everybody else, kind of have their own thing, right? And it's really important as well, because what you know brings so much to the table. And like, if you kind of know that, then you're not fake, because you're you know, and like you're important for you to show up,
right?
And that, yeah.
So this is a quote from our former CEO, former
senior vice president,
former
SVP,
yes.
Senior vice president,
about how you can, there's knowledge and you can internalize these things to prepare, but the key to success is to practice and practice and practice. So these things that we're telling you to do, they may not feel natural, but the more you do them and practice them, the more natural they'll feel.
Yeah. And how do you prepare for your interview? I know I studied a lot for my interview. I prepared so much because now in this day and age, there's so many websites out there. There's so many resources out there that writes out the questions for interview questions. 90% of interview questions you can anticipate, and that you'll be able to practice that.
So for my interview, which was a technical interview, I definitely studied for it like I did for a school exam. So I recommend that. But also to train yourself in articulating the solution and your thought process, I do a mock interview with my friends, even if they don't know what I'm talking about. It's useful to just talk in front of someone, and also you can also train yourself by doing a mock interview in front of a mirror.
Yeah, and it's really important, right? Because you're practicing and
practicing.
Yeah, and some of the best talents out there didn't just happen to be a talent. Do you think Beyonce or LeBron James and all of those just became who they become? Or even our own Sergio and Larry?
They weren't born that way.
Yeah, even the CEOs of Google and stuff like that. It wasn't an overnight success. It's really a lot of years of practice, a lot of making sure that you're putting out there. But also, the thing about imposter syndrome is the fact that you think that you don't know enough. Right, or you don't know all of it, but you know enough and you can practice.
So you have to practice being comfortable with what you've achieved and recognizing that.
Yeah, totally recognizing that. So how do you beat imposter syndrome? I think a very important part of it is to recognize and acknowledge it. We've talked about what imposter syndrome is, and if whatever we said today resonated with you, then you're probably struggling with it as well. So how do you focus on beating them? Focus on strategies that can build the confidence and reduce the stress. So we had the physical element, right? The power pose, the snap and the clap and the stomp. But also it's about practicing. Stop comparing yourself to other people. That's a very important part.
Especially again at Google, there's so many smart people. The minute you start comparing yourself to other people, then it's a path towards downhill.
Because then you start talking down to yourself.
Yes.
And that becomes really negative. So focus on your value, not your perfection. We have so much value that we bring to the table. There's so much perspective, so much experience, so much voice, and your voice is super important. It's a really cool thing that I really like to do, and this is something I personally practice as well, beside the power pose, is I have this pump up playlist. And how some people have pumped up playlists for if they go to the gym or if they go to exercise or to run and things like that. What I do is before presentations or before any big interview or meetings, I have a set of playlist songs that's upbeat and motivational. And I kind of put myself in a state. I kind of program my brain to feel really good. I feel really pumped up. So when I go in, I'm confident. And so that's a really cool trick to have as well.
Yeah. So trick your brain into doing this. I think that ties into the posture and the exercises.
And the practicing and things like that. And these are all really important ways to beat imposter syndrome. I think it's important for us to know as well that it's not just you. It's not just us, and it's not just an individual thing. A lot of people, especially high achievers, struggle with imposter syndrome. So together we can also come up with strategies to talk about this. And so that brings us to the live questions. We're going to go and see it.
Should we read it out?
Yes. Okay.
So this question is from Min, who's studying at MIT in Melbourne. I've learned Python and programming when I was 12 and I totally love it, but a lot of the time I have this feeling that I'm not as good as I'm supposed to be, given that I've been doing it for so long. How do you fight that feeling and at the same time channel that feeling to improve yourself? I think that goes into what I've been doing as well. Like Adhika said, I've been here for 11 years and I feel like I'm still improving. There's a lot of room for improvement, but at the same time recognize that all the things you've achieved, and don't compare yourself. Like when I went into computer science, a lot of my classmates did coding when they were kids for fun.
Wow.
and who had parents to guide them and whatever, right? The first time I learned programming, really, it was from like a starter course in high school, but really in university when I started like the major. So I was starting from like a much later stage, and I just felt like everyone knew what they were doing, and I was just taking baby steps. But it's okay. Like, you just gotta be positive and just keep learning.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is to acknowledge your own personal growth, right? Like, acknowledge the journey that you've been on and the kind of effort and the work that you've put in. And knowing that perfectionism does not exist. Like, you can't get to a point where you know everything. And so there's always an opportunity to learn and to grow and to stretch yourself. And yeah, just really important to not compare yourselves. It's very important that you, we kind of take on like, not being too complacent about like how far we've gone, but like acknowledging that we've gone a lot and also kind of like wanting to continue to improve ourselves. And I think that's a big part in Google as well, is that we're constantly growing and learning in Google. Like we've done so much, but there's always an opportunity for growth, and that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
We're just going to quickly check whether we have any other questions.
So our second question is from Bratin. When someone is praising us and I still doubt myself, is it imposter syndrome?
Sorry, give us 1 second.
Is it imposter syndrome or just overthinking? I think that is definitely a characteristic of imposter syndrome, is accepting compliments. And I've learned that you should just accept it. Like, be gracious and be happy about accepting it.
Yeah, it's so hard to accept compliments. You kind of forget, like, when someone gives you a compliment, just say thank you.
Yes.
And just take it,
Yeah.
And, but it is a really strong characteristic.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is a strong characteristic of imposter syndrome because you don't believe
Yeah.
that you deserve the compliment. So let's take the next question. Sometimes this is by Anchal. Sometimes it also happens that while my interviews, even when I know the answer, I feel not confident about it and messed up everything. How to deal with it in the interviews?
So in the interview, I think this is especially important. You have to fake confidence even if you don't feel confident.
Yeah.
Especially if you feel like you know the answer, say it with confidence. And if it's not the right answer, the interviewer will ask you lead-up questions, and they'll ask you to justify, and then just be prepared to justify that answer. And
I think it boils down to several things. It's about how you enter the interview, right? And like, how do you prime yourself to go into the interview? And that is why we talk about power poses, about making yourself get into a state where you feel confident, even if it's faking that confidence, but tricking your brain to feel confidence, because once you get into the interviewer in a confident stance, then it will stay with you. And also practice. Practice speaking it out. Just like you said just now, practice speaking out in the mirror so that when it comes to the point where you have to say it out, it's not the first time that you say it.
I think especially important is that, especially if you know the answer, don't let it show that you're not sure, because that's actually detrimental. It shows that you're not sure, and we want people who we don't want robots. We don't want perfection.
Yeah.
But we want people who
are confident.
Who are confident, who can make a stand, and who can recommend solutions. So we're hiring you for your brain, for your thinking ability. So we want you to be able to make a recommendation. Yeah. Next question is from Zahura. Is imposter syndrome growing in people more as we advance technologically, because it's easier to see what other people are up to and compare ourselves?
I don't know about like research or studies behind it, but there's definitely a lot of studies around how social media affects how we compare ourselves to other people, and so that definitely plays into imposter syndrome, or thinking that we're not good enough, or we don't know enough, and things like that. So I guess the simple answer to your question is we're not back to back research, but other research says that social media.
Yeah, I stopped using social media because of this. Not necessarily for technical reasons, but like I stopped wanting to compare myself to others, and you know, we all know people post the best part of themselves on social media, and that's not really who they are. So
it's not a holistic view, right?
Yeah, it's not a holistic
generally
view. So I stopped using it, and don't compare yourselves to other people.
Yeah, it's really hard, and I know this is something that a lot of people struggle with, regardless. And just being mindful that exactly like you said, people just put up the best part of themselves usually, and you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, or like what they themselves struggle with. So don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah, and I'm not recommending everyone to get off social media, but just take what you see with a grain of salt, and don't compare yourself.
Great, we have an interesting question by Deepak. I always fluctuate from imposter syndrome to overconfidence in different situations. Is it normal? We need a bit more context for this. But also, it also goes down to the point about how much you think you know, the perception of how much you think you know. Like, for example, if you're in a situation where like you're an amazing dancer and you're in a dance competition, and then you're like, you're overconfident, you know what you're doing.
This is your domain.
Yeah.
So of course you should feel confident.
Yeah, and like, imposter syndrome could be things that are different. Like, it's also contextual, right? Like, if you are going to be surrounded by people who are really, really, really smart as well, and then you think that you're a fake, then definitely you're going to be struggling with imposter syndrome. But if you are like literally the best or the most senior person in the room, then probably you're not going to be facing it.
Depends on the domain.
And the context as well, definitely. So I guess when you say it's normal, it definitely is. Like, I used to be a high school teacher, and like I definitely was very overconfident when I'm teaching, because I'm like the teacher, right? But when when I'm in Google, that really changes as well.
So our next question is from Mehant. Will recruiters at Google consider imposter syndrome and take up measures to suppress it during interview?
Well, this is one of the things that we do.
Oh, you mean like in your program?
So this part of the program is definitely like addressing imposter syndrome, making sure that we are aware about it.
To help you prepare for it, right?
But what about taking up measures to suppress it during interviews? We don't really have that,
I mean, it's not just about how you feel during interview, right? Like, if you have this syndrome and you happen to get hired, you will have to take care of it, like be able to overcome it during your job anyway. So it's not like just getting over the interview. It's preparing yourself just for life, actually. So I wouldn't say Google will help you suppress it more than like, having these sessions to help you
empower you
to overcome it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So we have another question coming in. A lot of the time we feel alone in overcoming imposter syndrome. Do you have conversations about imposter syndrome with your teams? How do you overcome it together? I think this one we can take it like individually as well, and say like our own perspectives. It's easy to feel alone in overcoming imposter syndrome, but I know like within my teams, I'm personally very open about my experience with imposter syndrome, and I actively talk about it, and I talk to people about it. And it's very interesting because every time I say to someone that I'm struggling with imposter syndrome, a lot of people will be like, no way, I didn't think so.
You're so outgoing.
Yeah, and then they'll be like, oh my god, me too. Like, I struggle with this too. And this whole notion of knowing that you're not alone kind of makes you realize that, it's not just on me. And it's a healthy conversation to have, because then people can be like, hey, like, this is, you're great, or like, hey, like, this is some stuff that we can support you with. And it really isn't something that that you can hide or you need to hide. And also because in Google, imposter syndrome is such a prevalent thing. We have an entire like series of stuff to just talk about imposter syndrome. So it's not necessarily something that's hidden, but like outside, yeah.
So definitely, especially on my current team, I just recently found out that like a lot of people feel like, oh, a lot of pressure to deliver things on time, and it's only when we talk about it with each other that we realize that everyone's feeling that way. And prior to that, we felt like we were alone in feeling this way. So I guess the way we recommend how you deal with it is having candid conversations with your team. And I think obviously that takes a level of comfort that you have to have with your coworkers. So, you know, I guess you have to establish that relationship previously with your coworkers in order to feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, definitely.
But once you do share, it is very healthy to, you know, recognize it and deal with it together. And then if you're in a professional setting, you can bring that up to your manager or whatever to address it.
Definitely, you know, and like talk to your friends, talk to people who are going through the same kind of like phases with you, those who are going for interviews and things like that. That's really important. And talk to people who know your value and know what your strengths are, so that they can tell you that these are your strengths and give you that confirmation and affirmation and confidence, right? Sometimes you just need that bit of feedback from somebody else, right?
So if you're in school, you can find out support groups or your friends who know you well. At Google, we have these things called ERGs, which is employee resource groups. Which, if you can't talk to anyone in your team, which is ideal, you can also reach out to these groups who can give you advice, who've been in similar situations.
Yeah, and I guess that goes to our next questions about what kind of trainings does Google provide for imposter syndrome, well-being, and so on. And so that's a really cool thing that we have at Google called employee resource groups, where like, you know, we have different groups where people of common interests and things together will come together and they will speak
different backgrounds. We have like a women at group, women engineers group.
We have a lot of other groups in Google as well, and then that's a great resource to kind of find support for each other and things like that. We also have a lot. We also have a lot of manager training in order to support each other, well-being training and things like that. We also have this kind of sessions to talk about imposter syndrome. We have Detachment Month. We have a lot of different initiatives.
Yeah, so I know the manager training, like managers have this training to recognize that, you know, like don't just look at the output of people, like you have to care about the work-life balance of the employees and like make sure they're supported and feel safe to voice their opinions and all of that.
We have another question coming in.
Zahura asks, what to ignore in the environment around us to not aggravate the syndrome in us? So I would say don't compare yourself to other people.
And I think there's this thing, right? Like as our brain, especially when we're facing imposter syndrome, we're primed to look out for evidence that whatever we're thinking is true. So for example, if we're facing imposter syndrome, our brain is kind of thinking, oh, we're not good enough, like we're just lucky, we're a fraud and stuff like that. So your brain will look for evidence that confirms this. For example, if you're struggling with imposter syndrome and then suddenly someone comes up to you and give you constructive criticism on like a project that you're talking about, and the immediate thing that you think about is not like, oh, I can do better. It's like, oh, I really am a fraud.
I screwed up.
Yeah, you know, and like kind of like, oh, you're being harsh on yourself, or like, oh, this is true. Like they're gonna find out I'm a fake and things like that. So being able to recognize that you're facing imposter syndrome is important, so that when you don't take things personally. That's really important.
So to your point, when you receive feedback, you can take it positively or you can take it negatively. So positively would be like you look at this as an opportunity to grow, and then the negative way would be like, oh, I didn't do well enough.
Like
so you should treat everything as an opportunity, not as like a
something that
misgiving.
Yeah, or something that proves that you're not good enough and things like that. So that's really important. Another thing to ignore in the environment is just like sometimes you just constantly look out for people's successes as evidence that you're not successful. Right? And so use other people's successes as motivation and an opportunity to actually role model or learn and things like that, versus as a confirmation that you're not good enough. And that's really important. It's a really mindset shift as well. Just not to confirm the negative things that you're thinking. Last question.
We answered the last question, which was share your experiences.
All right, so the last question, I'm just going to read it out. Can you share your experiences at Google or in the workplace that have made you feel like an imposter? How do you overcome it for that particular experiences? I think we shared a bit just now about how like we struggle with thinking like we're good enough and that we're an imposter.
I guess the general takeaway is that like I feel this all the time,
Me too.
and just be aware that you are prone to do this. Like I tend to do this, so recognize that you have this and try to take away the positive and like leave behind the negative.
Yeah, you know, and maybe I could just quickly like also jump in with just less experience, right? Like, so I lead the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and I've been in this space for the past 4 or 5 years, and like I know my stuff. You know, I've done trainings, I've done content, and I do a lot of teaching as well. But recently I had to kick off like a whole kind of new training for APAC, and I remember just like a few days and even the day before the training, I was stuck in this state like, oh my god, like I'm going to screw it up. Oh my god, I'm not good enough. Oh my god, I'm just faking this and everybody's going to figure out like I'm a fake when I'm running the training and things like that. And it got so bad that I was really stressed out. Like I was like, I nearly wanted to cancel the training, which I couldn't. So I had to sit down with my manager and be like, hey, like I'm really struggling with this. I don't think I'm going to be good enough or I'm going to do it. And literally what my manager said was, you've done this for the past decade. Like, you know what you're doing. You're the best person for the job. And because I created the content, she basically said, you created the content, you know the content best. You're the best person for the... And she just had to keep telling me. I just got to pause like, oh yeah, like I'm being very hard on myself. And just having those, knowing that even if you've done it for so long, like you've been here for 11 years, like you're just gonna, sometimes you're just gonna face it, and you're just gonna need like to get a bit of help from people to affirm you, or you just have to remind yourself in the mirror. Like,
so my experience is the same. Like I've been doing this for so many years, and I just needed people to keep reminding me that I just was recently tapped to be the tech lead of our team, and I was like, before this training, I would have thought I couldn't do it, but I just needed a push, and it's been fine so far. Like, people actually like feel like I can mentor them, and then my manager trusts my opinion. So just believe in yourself.
Then you know, fake it till you make it as well, and just keep growing. Just taking everything as an opportunity, and just knowing that sometimes all you need is that bit more self-confidence, and you're not a fake, you're not a fraud, it's not just lucky, you really deserve the success. So always have that in mind, pat yourself on the back, and make sure that you're not alone in facing this.
Okay.
So that is all that we have for today. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for giving us all your time. Very excited to see you again sometime soon. So I'm Atika, this is
Florbella.
And we are saying goodbye now. Bye.